The Kingpin, from street urchin to political juggernaut, a motivational and inspiring story written and published by the Zillion Pro. Lagos, a city that throbs with relentless energy, becomes the unlikely cradle for Joeking's extraordinary journey. This audiobook, The Kingpin, a motivational and inspiring story, chronicles his rise from a street urchin to a political powerhouse. Joeking's tale isn't a fairy tale. It's a raw, unflinching look at survival, ambition, and the price of power. We witness his transformation from a scrounger for scraps to a cunning strategist, navigating the brutal realities of a city where survival is a daily battle. The Kingpin is more than just a rags-to-riches story. It delves into the complexities of leadership, the allure and burden of power, and the constant struggle to maintain one's ideals in a system rife with corruption. Joeking's climb to the top is exhilarating, but it comes at a cost. He grapples with moral dilemmas, confronts ruthless enemies, and ultimately faces a defining choice: cling to the ruthless system he helped create, or forge a new path built on integrity. The Kingpin is an audiobook that will inspire and challenge you. It's a story about resilience, the power of second chances, and the enduring human spirit's ability to rise above circumstance. Prepare to be captivated by Joeking's journey, a testament to the fact that even the smallest spark can ignite a revolution. Chapter 1: Gutter Gold. The Lagos sun beat down mercilessly, transforming the corrugated metal shacks into shimmering mirages. 10-year-old Joeking weaved through the throngs of bodies, his bare feet slapping against the cracked pavement. His stomach growled, a constant companion in this symphony of honking taxis and shouting vendors. He wasn't a native Lagosian, but the sprawling city had adopted him as ruthlessly as it had tried to break him. Orphaned by a twist of fate he couldn't quite remember, Joeking navigated the labyrinthine streets with the instincts of a stray, his days a relentless scramble for survival. Today's hunt had yielded nothing but a bruised ego and a gnawing emptiness. Dejected, Joeking slumped against a wall, his gaze falling upon a discarded velvet box nestled amongst the refuse. Curiosity piqued, he fished it out, the tattered fabric cool against his calloused fingers. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded satin, lay a single gold cufflink. It wasn't much, a tarnished emblem of a life far removed from his own. But in his hand, it felt heavy, not with metal, but with possibility. A spark ignited within him, a flicker of defiance against the relentless grip of poverty. This wasn't just a trinket, it was a challenge, a whisper of a different future. Fueled by newfound purpose, Joeking abandoned his usual scavenging grounds. He ventured deeper into the city, his senses on high alert. Luxury shops and towering skyscrapers replaced the ramshackle dwellings. He felt out of place, a stray dog sniffing at the edge of a forbidden garden. But the glint of gold from a discarded earring discarded near a posh cafe emboldened him. He pocketed it, a small victory in a world that seemed determined to keep him down. The day wore on, each scrap of metal, each dented coin, a tiny triumph. By nightfall, Joeking clutched a handful of his treasures, a meager fortune by any conventional measure, but a universe to him. He found shelter in an abandoned building, the cold concrete floor a poor substitute for a bed, but the warmth of his small collection soothed his empty stomach and his restless spirit. As he drifted off to sleep, the image of the gold cufflink danced in his eyelids. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a symbol of a world beyond the grimy gutter, a world where hunger wasn't a constant companion and dreams weren't luxuries. Joeking knew the climb would be steep, the path treacherous. But for the first time in his life, he had a destination, a shimmering vision that beckoned him out of the darkness. He clutched the cufflink tighter, a silent promise echoing in his heart: he would survive, he would thrive, and he would leave the gutter behind. Chapter 2: Coins and Camaraderie. Survival remained Joeking's primary objective, but the glint of gold had ignited a fire in his belly, a fire for something more. He wasn't just scavenging for scraps anymore, he was strategizing, learning the rhythms of the city like a seasoned gambler. He discovered that discarded newspapers near construction sites yielded valuable metal scraps. He learned to identify wealthy tourists, their flashy watches and dangling jewelry easy marks for a nimble child like himself. The guild gnawed at him, a constant tug-of-war between desperation and a nascent morality. But hunger was a harsh teacher, and survival trumped everything else. One rainy afternoon, huddled under a flimsy awning, Joeking spotted a group of urchins jostling for position near a bakery. They were a motley crew, their clothes in various states of disrepair, their faces etched with the grime of the streets. He recognized the desperation in their eyes, a reflection of his own struggle. Hesitantly, he approached them, the gold cufflink dangling from a string around his neck, a silent offering of truce. The leader, a wiry boy named Tunde with a missing front tooth, eyed him with suspicion, but the desperation in Joeking's gaze outweighed his initial distrust. They huddled together, sharing their meager spoils and meager plans. Joeking, emboldened by a newfound sense of camaraderie, unveiled his collection, the salvaged scraps, the dented coins, the pilfered trinkets. Their eyes widened, not just at the quantity, but at the cunning behind it. Joeking, for the first time, wasn't just surviving, he was leading. He proposed a plan, a risky one, but one that promised a bigger haul. A wealthy businessman was scheduled to visit a nearby market. It was a gamble, fraught with the possibility of a beating from the ever-present security guards. But the potential reward, a misplaced wallet, a dropped phone, outweighed the risk. With a mix of trepidation and excitement, the ragtag group agreed. The market was a cacophony of sights and smells. Joeking, disguised in a tattered hat and oversized shirt, mingled with the crowd, his senses on high alert. Tunde, agile and quick, created a diversion, a well-timed bump into the businessman while the others, including a scrawny girl named Aisha with a talent for disappearing into thin air, scanned for any targets of opportunity. The chaos worked. A bulging wallet slipped from the businessman's pocket, snatched by Aisha in a blink. They scattered, a well-rehearsed choreography of escape home by necessity. Back in their ramshackle haven, a dilapidated warehouse with a leaky roof, they celebrated their victory. The stolen wallet yielded more than they dared to hope for: crisp bills, credit cards, and a small gold chain. Joeking, ever the strategist, proposed a new plan, selling the valuables to a shady fence on the outskirts of the city, a man known as Old Man Snake. The name sent shivers down their spines, but the promise of a decent meal and a safe haven for a few nights outweighed their fear. The journey to Old Man Snake's den was fraught with tension. Abandoned buildings and narrow alleys, shrouded in perpetual twilight, became their obstacle course. But they stuck together, a band of misfits bound by necessity and a glimmer of shared purpose. Old Man Snake, a wizened figure with eyes as cold as a reptile's, scrutinized their wares. The negotiation was tense, a battle of wits between seasoned predators and desperate prey. In the end, they emerged with a fistful of crumpled bills, enough for a few days of relative comfort and a sense of accomplishment that went beyond mere survival. As they huddled around a makeshift fire that night, Joeking looked at his newfound companions. They were more than just a team, they were a family of sorts, a ragtag bunch bound by the harsh realities of the street. He knew this wouldn't be their last gamble, their last brush with danger, but for the first time, he wasn't alone. He had a team, and with them, a flicker of hope for a future brighter than the grimy streets they called home. Chapter 3: School of Hard Knocks. Lagos wasn't just a city, it was a brutal teacher. Its lessons were scrawled on peeling walls, whispered in the murmurs of desperate deals, and etched in the hardened faces of its inhabitants. Joeking and his ragtag crew, now known as the Scrappers, became eager students in this unforgiving school. The streets became their classroom, each day a test of survival, cunning, and resilience. Tunde, the self-proclaimed leader, schooled them in the art of petty theft, his nimble fingers a blur as he relieved unsuspecting tourists of their belongings. Aisha, the quiet observer, became their lookout, her sharp eyes scanning for approaching security or the telltale signs of trouble. Joeking, the strategist, studied the city's underbelly, observing the power dynamics, the unspoken rules, and the ruthless hierarchy that governed life on the streets. He learned about the different factions, the hawkers guild that controlled the market stalls, the area boys who extorted protection money, and the big men, shrouded figures who pulled the strings from the shadows. The lessons weren't all about stealing and surviving. The city offered unexpected mentors in the most unlikely places. Mama Raisai, a gruff but kind-hearted vendor in the market, taught them basic math, allowing them to avoid being cheated by unscrupulous buyers. Old Man Jabari, a retired tailor with a twinkle in his eye, shared stories of his youth, his words filled with wisdom and a surprising tenderness. These encounters were pockets of humanity in a harsh world, reminding them of a life beyond the constant scramble for survival. Violence was a constant threat. One day, their territory was encroached upon by another group of street urchins, the Razorbacks, led by a hulking teenager named Scar. A turf war erupted, a chaotic melee of fists, stones, and makeshift weapons. Joeking, though smaller than Scar, fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal. He landed a lucky blow, sending Scar sprawling, and the Razorbacks retreated with threats of revenge hanging heavy in the air. The victory was bittersweet, a stark reminder of the precariousness of their existence. Life wasn't all drudgery and violence. The scrappers found moments of joy in the simplest things: the shared meal of stolen mangoes, a laugh at Toonday's latest escapade, the warmth of a fire flickering on a cold night. They discovered a camaraderie forged in hardship, a sense of belonging that transcended their individual struggles. Joeking, however, yearned for something more. He devoured discarded newspapers, piecing together a fragmented understanding of the world beyond the grimy streets. He saw images of politicians, men with power and influence, who held the keys to a different life. A seed of ambition was planted, a yearning for a future where they wouldn't just survive, but thrive. The school of hard knocks was shaping him, hardening his exterior, sharpening his mind, and awakening a hunger for a different kind of power, the power to change their destiny. The streets had taught him the harsh realities of life, but Joeking, unlike his peers content with daily survival, craved a different lesson, a lesson in rising above the chaos, a lesson in becoming more than just a product of his environment. The city was his teacher, but Joeking was determined to become the master of his own fate. Chapter 4: A chance encounter and a ladder up. The Lagos sun beat down mercilessly, reflecting off the chrome bumper of a gleaming black limousine. Joeking, crouched behind an overflowing dumpster, watched the vehicle glide to a stop outside a brightly lit hotel. A uniformed chauffeur emerged, his crisp white gloves a stark contrast to Joeking's dirt-encrusted fingers. A man, impeccable dressed and radiating an aura of power, stepped out of the car. This was Chief Akinzanya, a rising political star known for his charisma and ambitious plans for Lagos. Joeking had been tracking Chief Akinzanya for weeks. News of his visit to the city had spread like wildfire, igniting a flicker of hope in the young hustler's heart. He devoured every news scrap he could find, piecing together the politician's platform, education reform, infrastructure development, and most importantly, a promise to clean up the rampant corruption that plagued the city. Joeking saw in Chief Akinzanya a potential bridge, a way out of the endless cycle of petty theft and violence that defined his life. But approaching a politician, particularly one with such a strong security detail, was a daunting prospect. Just as Joeking debated retreating, a discarded newspaper fluttered past, landing at his feet. The bold headline screamed, "Chief Akinzanya seeks community input for development plans." A spark flickered in Joeking's eyes. This was his chance. He emerged from behind the dumpster, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The security guard's gaze snapped towards him, his hand instinctively reaching for the holstered weapon at his hip. Before the guard could react, Joeking launched into a well-rehearsed speech, honed through nights spent practicing in front of a cracked mirror. He spoke of the struggles of the street kids, the lack of opportunity, the desperation that fueled crime. His voice trembled slightly, but his words carried a weight and sincerity that surprised even himself. The guard, initially wary, found himself captivated by Joeking's raw passion. Hesitantly, he approached Chief Akinzanya, who listened intently as the tale of the scrappers unfolded. Akinzanya, to everyone's surprise, dismissed his security and invited Joeking for a cup of coffee at the hotel cafe. The conversation that followed was a turning point in Joeking's life. He spoke not just for himself, but for all the invisible inhabitants of the city's underbelly. He spoke of their desire for education, for a chance to break free from the cycle of poverty, of a stake in the city's future. Chief Akinzanya, impressed by Joeking's intelligence and leadership potential, saw an opportunity. He saw a way to connect with the very people he aimed to serve, a way to ensure his plans weren't built on empty promises. He offered Joeking a small but significant role to gather information from the street level, to gauge the pulse of the city's forgotten youth. Joeking's initial jubilation was tempered by a jolt of fear. He knew the dangers of aligning himself with politicians. The streets were rife with rumors about double-crossing, empty promises, and ruthless manipulation. But he saw in Chief Quinceañer's eyes a flicker of something genuine, the desire to make a difference. He knew this was a gamble, a risky ascent on a rickety ladder out of the gutter. But the alternative, a life on the streets, defined by desperation and violence, was unbearable. Hesitantly, Joeking accepted the offer. Stepping out of the cafe, the Lagos sun felt different somehow. It wasn't just the warmth on his skin, it was the warmth of hope, a newfound purpose that propelled him forward. Joeking, the street urchin, was embarking on a new journey, the journey filled with uncertainty, but also with the intoxicating promise of change. He was no longer just a product of his environment, he was becoming a player, a voice for the voiceless, a young man with a dream bigger than the sprawling city he called home. Chapter 5: The Apprentice Politician. Joeking's life transformed overnight. Gone were the days of scavenging for scraps and dodging security guards. He now worked from a small, cluttered office within Chief Quinceañer's campaign headquarters. His days were filled with briefings, strategy meetings, and frantic errands. He became the chief's eyes and ears on the street, a bridge between the politician and the very people he aimed to represent. The transition wasn't smooth. The scrappers, his former companions, eyed him with suspicion. They saw him as a sellout, abandoning their shared struggle for the air-conditioned comfort of the campaign office. Joeking, torn between loyalty and ambition, promised to use his newfound influence to improve their lives. He secured donations of food and clothing, arranged for educational workshops, and lobbied for community centers in underprivileged areas. But the political world was a labyrinth, filled with twists and turns. Joeking navigated it with the cautiousness of a seasoned gambler. He learned about political maneuvering, the art of the deal, and the subtle language of power. He witnessed firsthand the corruption that festered beneath the surface, seasoned politicians lining their pockets while the very people they claimed to serve continued to struggle. Disillusionment threatened to engulf him. Was Chief Quinceañer any different? Was this just another system designed to exploit the vulnerable? Joeking channeled his frustration into action. He became a thorn in the side of the campaign's old guard, questioning their tactics and advocating for a more transparent approach. His street smarts and sharp wit earned him the grudging respect of some, the outright hostility of others. But Joeking had the chief's ear, something that rankled many veteran campaigners. Quinceañer, impressed by Joeking's unwavering commitment to helping underprivileged youth, used him as a sounding board, a voice of authenticity amidst the polished rhetoric of seasoned advisors. Joeking, in turn, used his position to influence the campaign's platform, pushing for initiatives that addressed the needs of the forgotten communities. The campaign gained momentum. Joeking's unconventional approach, his ability to connect with voters on a personal level, resonated with the masses. He became a symbol of hope, a young man who had clawed his way out of poverty, a testament to the possibilities that the city held. His past as a street urchin became a narrative tool, not a source of shame, but a symbol of his understanding of their struggles. But success bred enemies. Rival politicians, threatened by Quinceañer's rising popularity, launched smear campaigns. They dug into Joeking's past, fabricating stories of criminal activity and shady dealings. Joeking faced public scrutiny, his every word dissected, his every action questioned. The pressure mounted, threatening to suffocate the spark of hope he had ignited. Joeking stood at a crossroads. He could retreat, slink back into the shadows, or he could face the accusations head-on. He remembered the faces of the scrappers, the hopeful eyes of children who saw in him a beacon of change. He decided to fight. With Chief Quinceañer's backing, he addressed the accusations head-on, his honesty and transparency resonating with the people. The scandal backfired. Voters saw the desperation of his attackers and connected with Joeking's vulnerability. His past became a testament to his resilience, his fight for a better life a reflection of their own aspirations. The campaign gained even more momentum, propelling Chief Quinceañer to a landslide victory. As the dust settled, the city held its breath. Would Chief Akinzanya be the leader he promised to be? Would Joeking, the street urchin turned political prodigy, remain a force for good, or become another cog in the very system he had fought against? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain: the city of Lagos was about to witness the rise of a new kind of power, a power forged on the streets, tested in the crucible of politics, and driven by an unyielding desire to change the city's destiny. Chapter 6: The Kingpin Ascends. The weight of victory settled on Joeking's shoulders like a gilded cloak. Chief Akinzanya, now the newly elected governor, lauded Joeking during his inaugural speech, calling him a symbol of hope and resilience. The cheers of the crowd echoed in Joeking's ears, but a disquieting feeling gnawed at him. The streets had seemed so close, the struggles of the forgotten so vivid, back in the cramped campaign office. Now, from the plush confines of the governor's mansion, the city looked like a distant tapestry, a million faces blurring into one. Joeking wasn't given much time for introspection. He was thrust into the heart of the political machine, appointed chief advisor to the governor on youth and community outreach. The title sounded empowering, but the reality was a labyrinth of bureaucratic hurdles and backroom deals. He found himself battling seasoned politicians, their faces etched with cynicism, their voices dripping with veiled threats. His attempts to push for swift reforms were met with resistance, his street-smart tactics dismissed as naive idealism. Frustration simmered within him. He missed the scrappy energy of the campaign trail, the direct connection with the people. He saw broken promises fester like wounds, abandoned community centers, unfulfilled scholarship programs, the same tired cycle of empty rhetoric and unfulfilled needs. He became the bridge between the disillusioned public and the increasingly distant governor. One day, a group of scrappers, now young men themselves, stormed into Joeking's office. They weren't there to celebrate their old friend's success. They were there to confront him, their eyes filled with the same desperation he once felt. "You've gone soft," they accused him. "You've forgotten where you came from." Their words were a harsh but necessary reminder. That night, Joeking poured his heart out to Governor Akinzanya. He spoke of the disillusionment of the youth, the broken promises, the widening gap between the government and the people it served. He proposed a radical solution: establish district councils, empower local communities to make decisions and manage resources directly. Akinzanya, initially hesitant, eventually saw the merit in Joeking's plan. He recognized that the old system perpetuated the very problems they were trying to solve. The implementation was messy, fraught with bureaucratic resistance and accusations of bypassing established power structures. But Joeking, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose, navigated the political minefield with a cunning honed on the streets. He mobilized the scrappers, now a network of young, passionate volunteers, to spread awareness and gather community input. The initiative gained momentum, resonating with the people's desire for a say in their own destiny. The success of the district council solidified Joeking's position. He became known as the Kingpin, a moniker once whispered with fear on the streets, now a symbol of empowerment and change. His influence grew, both within the government and with the people. He became the architect of social programs, the voice of the voiceless, the maverick politician who dared to challenge the status quo. But power, as Joeking was slowly realizing, was a double-edged sword. He became a target for those threatened by his meteoric rise. Whispers of corruption began to circle, fueled by his unconventional methods and past associations. Joeking found himself entangled in a web of suspicion, his every move scrutinized by political rivals and a suspicious press. One night, returning from a late meeting, his car swerved off the road, slamming into a concrete barrier. The accident was labeled a freak occurrence, but Joeking couldn't shake the feeling it was more than just bad luck. Paranoia started to creep in, a constant awareness of eyes watching his every move. The streets, once a familiar playground, now felt like a treacherous jungle. Joeking stood at another crossroads. He could cling to power, navigate the treacherous waters of political intrigue, and risk becoming the very system he had fought against. Or he could take a stand, gamble on his integrity, and redefine the meaning of power in the face of those who sought to manipulate it. The answer, Joeking realized with a chilling certainty, would determine not just his own fate, but the future of the city he had sworn to change. Chapter 7: The Price of Power. The near-fatal car accident became a turning point for Joeking. The once vibrant city now seemed shrouded in shadows, a constant reminder of the tenuousness of his position. Paranoia gnawed at him, fueling sleepless nights and a growing skepticism towards those around him. Governor Urchin's Anya, initially supportive, grew increasingly distant, burdened by the pressures of balancing Joeking's disruptive reforms with the demands of entrenched political powers. The whispers of corruption intensified, fueled by fabricated stories planted by his political adversaries. Newspaper headlines screamed of Kingpin's shady deals and youth advisor, master manipulator. Joeking, once hailed as a savior, became the target of public derision. Even the scrappers, his loyal street soldiers, began to question his motives. Was he truly different from the politicians he sought to replace, or had power simply corrupted him as it had corrupted so many others? Joeking retreated into a shell of his former self. The vibrant, passionate leader who had inspired hope with his unorthodox methods now appeared jaded and withdrawn. He wrestled with a profound sense of disillusionment. The system, he realized with a bitter taste in his mouth, had a way of devouring even those who intended to change it. One day, a young woman named Aisha, a former member of the Scrappers who had gone on to become a community leader, approached him. Her eyes, once filled with admiration, now held a flicker of disappointment. "Remember what you promised us, Joeking?" she asked, her voice laced with sadness. "Remember the streets, the forgotten ones?" Her words were a splash of cold water in the face of his self-pity. He looked at her, then beyond her, at the faces of countless others who, despite the hardships, still held onto a sliver of hope. The city, with all its imperfect irons, was his home, and his people, his responsibility. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him crumble. Joeking decided to fight back, not with the ruthless tactics of his enemies, but with the transparency and honesty that had been the bedrock of his initial success. He held a press conference, unannounced and unscripted. He spoke from the heart, admitting his mistakes, denouncing the fabricated accusations, and outlining a bold vision for a future where power served the people, not the other way around. The gamble paid off. His vulnerability resonated with the public. People, tired of the political mudslinging, saw a glimmer of genuineness in Joeking's raw emotions. The press, initially skeptical, started digging deeper, exposing the manufactured scandals and the corrupt forces behind them. Public opinion began to shift, but Joeking's enemies wouldn't back down without a fight. They used their influence to launch a full-scale investigation, accusing him of embezzlement and abuse of power. The investigation was a sham, a weaponized tool in a political power struggle. Joeking faced the prospect of being stripped of his position, his reputation tarnished, and his dreams for the city crumble into dust. Yet, amidst the chaos, a spark of hope emerged. People from all walks of life, inspired by Joeking's courage, rallied behind him. Community leaders, ordinary citizens, even former adversaries, united under the banner of transparency and accountability. The investigation became a public spectacle, exposing the underbelly of political corruption to the harsh light of day. The fight was far from over. Even with the public on his side, Joeking knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for the first time in a long while, he wasn't alone. He had ignited a movement, a flickering flame of hope that refused to be extinguished. The Kingpin, once a symbol of power, was now a symbol of resistance, a man who dared to challenge the system at its core, even if it meant sacrificing his own ambitions for a brighter future for the city he loved. Chapter 8: The City on Trial. Lagos buzzed with an electric energy. The investigation into Joeking's alleged corruption had become the city's prime-time drama, playing out on television screens and street corners with a fervor that rivaled any football match. Public opinion, once swayed by manufactured scandals, had shifted dramatically. Joeking, the ostracized Kingpin, had become a reluctant hero, his honesty and vulnerability resonating with the masses. Community centers became impromptu war rooms, buzzing with passionate debate. Social media exploded with messages of support, the hashtag #StandWithJoeking trending nationwide. Aisha, along with other former scrappers, emerged as fierce advocates, their voices carrying the weight of lived experience and unwavering loyalty. They organized rallies, mobilized voters, and pressured the authorities for a fair and transparent investigation. The courtroom, once the domain of lawyers and hushed proceedings, transformed into a stage. Joeking, no longer a slick politician, became the city's protagonist, his every word dissected, his every emotion scrutinized. He faced his accusers, a phalanx of seasoned politicians with steely gazes and hidden agendas, their accusations laced with threats and veiled intimidation. The star witness for the prosecution was a disgruntled former associate, bribed to lie about Joeking's involvement in shady deals. But under the relentless questioning of Joeking's lawyer, the man's fabricated story crumbled like a house of cards. Evidence, meticulously compiled by a team of volunteer investigators led by Aisha, exposed the web of lies and the political machinations behind the investigation. The public watched, glued to their screens, as the truth began to unravel. Reporters, initially skeptical, shifted their tone, their headlines now screaming corrupt politicians exposed and Joeking, victim or mastermind. The pressure mounted on Governor Akinzanya, who found himself caught between his loyalty to Joeking and the demands of the powerful figures who had orchestrated the entire charade. Joeking, emboldened by the growing tide of public support, took the offensive. He exposed the systemic corruption that plagued the city, the way power was wielded to silence dissent and manipulate the masses. His voice, once passionate but uncertain, now resonated with the conviction of a man fighting for a cause bigger than himself. The trial became a crucible, a test not just of Joeking's innocence but of the city's very soul. The streets, once a breeding ground for cynicism and apathy, now echoed with chants of justice for Joeking and end the corruption. The city was on trial, its citizens demanding accountability from those who held the reins of power. The final verdict hung in the balance. The judge, a weary man burdened by the weight of expectation, deliberated 4 days. Finally, the gavel slammed, and the verdict was announced, not guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in cheers, a wave of relief and jubilation washing over the city. Joeking, overwhelmed with emotion, emerged from the court a free man, but not unscathed. The ordeal had taken its toll. The scars of betrayal ran deep, the taste of manufactured accusations lingering like a bitter aftertaste. Joeking had glimpsed the dark underbelly of politics, the ruthless lengths to which those in power would go to maintain the status quo. But amidst the disillusionment, there was a flicker of defiant hope. The city, once resigned to the inevitability of corruption, had shown its teeth. The trial had ignited a firestorm of public discourse, a demand for transparency that could no longer be ignored. Joeking, the reluctant hero, had become a symbol of that demand, a testament to the power of the people when united against a corrupt system. The fight was far from over. The corrupt politicians might have been exposed, but the system that nurtured them remained. Joeking, however, was no longer just a street urchin turned politician. He was a leader forged in the fires of adversity, a man who understood the city's pulse and the yearning for change that beat within its heart. The question remained, would he use his newfound power and public trust to dismantle the corrupt system, or would he become a cog within it? The answer, Joeking knew, would determine not just his own destiny, but the future of the city he had sworn to fight for. Chapter 9, Crossroads. The weight of the not guilty verdict settled on Joeking's shoulders like a bittersweet cloak. Vindication tasted like ashes in his mouth. The trial had been a grueling ordeal, a constant reminder of the city's festering corruption and the lengths to which those in power would go to maintain it. He stood on the courthouse steps, the cheers of his supporters ringing in his ears. Aisha, her eyes shining with a fierce loyalty, squeezed his arm. The scrappers, his former companions who had become his staunchest allies, erupted in jubilant celebration. But amidst the celebratory chaos, Joeking felt a gnawing sense of uncertainty. The city, once a hazy tapestry from the plush confines of the governor's mansion, was now a vibrant entity pulsing with raw energy. He saw the faces in the crowd, the hopeful eyes of the youth, the weary determination of the working class, the quiet anger of those perpetually disenfranchised. They weren't just celebrating his victory, they were yearning for a leader who would truly represent them. Inside the governor's mansion, the atmosphere was a stark contrast. Governor Akinzanya, his face etched with a mixture of relief and unease, greeted Joeking with a hesitant handshake. The camaraderie that had once fueled their campaign had been replaced by a heavy silence. Akinzanya, burdened by political realities, seemed to shrink under the weight of Joeking's unwavering gaze. "We won the battle," Joeking stated, his voice laced with a quiet defiance, "but the war is far from over." He spoke of the systemic rot that had been exposed during the trial, the need for genuine reform, not just symbolic victories. Akinzanya listened with a pained expression, a ghost of the idealistic politician Joeking once believed in flickering in his eyes. The conversation that followed was a turning point. Joeking, emboldened by the public's support, laid out his vision for the future. He proposed a radical restructuring of the government, a system that empowered local communities and prioritized transparency. Akinzanya, caught between the demands of his political backers and the growing public pressure for change, hesitated. It's political suicide, he warned, his voice laced with a weary cynicism. But Joeking remained undeterred. He spoke of a mandate from the people, a tidal wave of change that couldn't be ignored. The meeting ended without a clear resolution, a heavy silence hanging in the air. Joeking returned to his office, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He was no longer just a street urchin seeking a better life, nor a political prodigy navigating the treacherous waters of power. He was a symbol, a beacon of hope for a city yearning for change. But the path forward was fraught with uncertainty. He could choose the easier route, remain within the system, pushing for incremental change and hoping for the best. But this outcome left a bitter taste in his mouth. The trial had shown him the system's limitations, its tendency to co-opt even the most well-intentioned reformers. The other path was far more dangerous. He could become a true revolutionary, a leader who challenged the very foundation of the corrupt system. But this path risked alienating powerful allies, fracturing the fragile unity he had fostered, and potentially leading to his own downfall. As the Lagos sun dipped below the horizon, painting the city in fiery hues, Joeking stood at his window, the weight of the decision heavy on his heart. He knew this fight was bigger than him, bigger than any political ambition. He had a choice to make: become a cog in the very machine he sought to dismantle, or risk everything to become the catalyst for a real revolution. The future of Lagos, the city that had nurtured him and tested him, hung in the balance. Joeking, the Kingpin, stood at a crossroads, and his choice would determine the city's fate: a stagnant system of corruption or a path towards a brighter, more equitable future. Chapter 10: The Spark Ignites. Days blurred into weeks as Joeking wrestled with his decision. Meetings with Governor Akinzanya became tense negotiations, a tug-of-war between cautious reform and radical change. Joeking pushed for his vision: a decentralized government, empowered communities, and complete transparency in financial dealings. Akinzanya, pressured by his party and wary of political suicide, offered lukewarm compromises. Joeking knew compromise wouldn't be enough. The trial had exposed the festering wound of corruption, and the city demanded genuine healing. He turned to the people, his most powerful weapon. He addressed massive rallies, his voice echoing through crowded streets, his words resonating with raw honesty and a passionate plea for change. "We are not pawns in their game," he declared, his voice amplified by loudspeakers. "We are the city. The power lies with us, not with those who hide in their ivory towers." The crowds roared in approval, their faces filled with a newfound urgency. This wasn't just about Joeking's political future, it was about reclaiming their city. News of the rallies reached every corner of Lagos. Social media exploded with the hashtag #JoekingForChange, becoming a rallying cry for the disillusioned and dispossessed. Community leaders, inspired by Joeking's courage, organized their own protests, demanding accountability from their local representatives. A wave of citizen activism swept through the city, a tide no politician could ignore. The pressure mounted on Akinzanya. His party, fearing the public's wrath, urged him to appease Joeking. His conscience, once muffled by political expediency, stirred in the face of the people's growing defiance. He finally called Joeking into his office, his face etched with a reluctant acceptance. "The city is changing, Joeking," he admitted, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Perhaps your way is the only way forward." A tentative agreement was reached. Joeking would spearhead a series of landmark reforms, dismantling bureaucratic layers and empowering local communities. It wasn't everything he had envisioned, but it was a crack in the system, a starting point for a long overdue revolution. The road ahead was fraught with challenges. The old guard, threatened by their waning power, would fight back with a fury, but Joeking was no longer alone. He had a team of passionate supporters: Aisha, the fiercely loyal former scrappers, and a growing legion of citizen activists. Together, they formed a formidable force, wielding the power of public scrutiny and an unwavering commitment to change. The reforms wouldn't happen overnight, but the city, once resigned to its fate, was buzzing with a newfound energy. Community leaders, empowered by increased resources and decision-making power, tackled local problems with an enthusiasm that had been absent for years. Schools received much-needed renovations, local businesses thrived under the watchful eyes of their communities, and a culture of accountability began to take root. Joeking, once a street urchin, was now a symbol of citizen empowerment. He wasn't a flawless hero, he bore the scars of betrayal and the lingering cynicism of the streets. But he had ignited a spark, a fire for change that spread through the city's veins. He wasn't just changing the system, he was inspiring a generation to hold their leaders accountable and fight for the city they deserved. As the Lagos sun painted the sky in vibrant hues, Joeking stood on a rooftop overlooking the sprawling metropolis. He saw the faces of children playing in newly built parks, the bustling markets brimming with energy, and a sense of hope that had been absent for years. The city was still a work in progress, a complex tapestry woven with hardship and resilience. But it was changing, one step at a time, a testament to the power of a street urchin who dared to dream of a better future. The fight was far from over, but Joeking, the Kingpin, knew he wasn't alone. He had a city to change, and the citizens of Lagos were ready to stand with him, their voices united in a chorus of hope. Chapter 11: Echoes of Progress. 5 years had passed since the trial that thrust Joeking into the national spotlight. The once idealistic politician had matured into a seasoned leader, his eyes still holding the glint of street smarts but tempered with a newfound pragmatism. The city of Lagos, though far from perfect, pulsed with a different rhythm. The scars of corruption remained, a constant reminder of the battles fought and won. But woven into the fabric of the city was a nascent sense of empowerment, a collective belief that change, however gradual, was possible. Joeking's signature reform, the Community Empowerment Act, had become the cornerstone of the city's governance. Local councils, brimming with passionate volunteers like Aisha and other former scrappers, tackled neighborhood issues with a fervor that had been absent for decades. Schools, once crumbling testaments to neglect, were renovated, their classrooms echoing with the excited chatter of children. Healthcare clinics, previously understaffed and ill-equipped, were revitalized, offering essential services to communities that had long been neglected. The road hadn't been smooth. Vested interests, threatened by the loss of control, fought back tooth and nail. Sabotage attempts, both subtle and brazen, became a constant challenge. Politicians, accustomed to backroom deals and opaque decision-making, grumbled about the inconvenience of transparency. But Joeking, no longer the naive newcomer, had learned to navigate the treacherous waters of Lagos politics. He built coalitions, leveraging public pressure and the unwavering support of the newly energized citizenry. His biggest challenge, however, came from within his own party. Governor Akinzanya, initially a reluctant supporter, had grown increasingly wary of Joeking's rising popularity. The man who had once seen Joeking as a symbol of hope now viewed him as a political threat. Akinzanya, pressured by party traditionalists, began to distance himself from the very reforms he had once endorsed. The simmering tension erupted during a heated party meeting. Joeking, his voice laced with barely contained anger, accused Akinzanya of backsliding, of succumbing to the whispers of the corrupt elite. Akinzanya, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment, retorted that Joeking's idealism was naive and impractical. The party, caught in the crossfire, fractured along ideological lines. The public watched with bated breath. Joeking, once a maverick within the party, was now its most popular figure. His approval rating soared, fueled by a public yearning for genuine leadership. Akinzanya, on the other hand, became a symbol of the very system Joeking had fought against. The inevitable happened. Joeking, along with a significant portion of the party faithful, broke away to form a new political movement. The Lagos For Change Party, fueled by a grassroots movement and a charismatic leader, took the city by storm. Their platform, a continuation of the decentralization efforts and a relentless pursuit of transparency, resonated deeply with the electorate. The upcoming elections became a referendum on the future of Lagos. The once sleepy campaign rallies morphed into vibrant showcases of citizen participation. Musicians performed songs critical of the status quo, poets recited verses about hope and justice, and ordinary citizens took to the stage to share their experiences of a changing city. Joeking, no longer the angry young man from the streets, was a seasoned campaigner, his speeches weaving personal anecdotes with a clear vision for the future. Election day arrived, the city buzzing with an electric anticipation. When the results were announced, Lagos erupted in a joyous celebration. The Lagos for Change party had secured a landslide victory, a resounding endorsement of Joeking's vision for a more empowered and accountable city. The celebrations were short-lived. The real work, Joeking knew, was just beginning. Leading a city from the opposition was one thing, governing it effectively was an entirely different beast. He assembled a team of passionate individuals, a blend of experienced technocrats and young idealists brimming with fresh ideas. The challenges were immense. Years of neglect had left deep scars on the city's infrastructure. Slums still sprawled on the outskirts, a constant reminder of the city's vast inequalities. Powerful corporations, accustomed to backroom deals, lobbied fiercely against regulations designed to protect the environment and ensure fair labor practices. Joeking, however, was undeterred. He tackled each problem head-on, prioritizing transparency and public participation in every decision. Budget allocations were made public, community meetings became a cornerstone of governance, and a whistleblower hotline ensured that corruption wouldn't fester in the shadows. The road to progress was slow and arduous. There were setbacks and frustrations, moments when Joeking questioned whether his fight was making a real difference. But then, he would see a newly built playground teeming with laughter, a bustling community center offering job training to the underprivileged, or the determined glint in the eyes of a young girl. Chapter 12, The Kingpin's Legacy. 10 years had passed since Joeking's meteoric rise to power, but one cynical street urchin, the reluctant politician, had become a seasoned leader with streaks of gray in his hair and lines etched around his eyes, testaments to the battles fought and victories won. Lagos, the city that had nurtured him and tested him, was a different place. The scars of the past remained, a constant reminder of the fight against entrenched corruption. Slums still existed on the city's fringes, but they were shrinking, replaced by pockets of affordable housing. Schools, once dilapidated, were now vibrant centers of learning. Healthcare clinics, once understaffed and ill-equipped, were bustling with activity, providing essential services to all corners of the city. The legacy of Joeking's Lagos for Change movement wasn't just in the improved infrastructure or revitalized social programs. It was in the spirit of the city itself. A new generation, raised on the principles of civic engagement and transparency, had taken root. Young people, inspired by Joeking's journey, were actively participating in their communities, holding their leaders accountable, and demanding a better future. Joeking himself had undergone a transformation. The brash idealism of his early days had been tempered by the realities of governance. He had learned the art of compromise, the importance of building coalitions, and the delicate dance of balancing progress with political realities. His time in office hadn't been without its challenges. Powerful corporations, their profits threatened by stricter regulations, continued to lobby relentlessly. Political rivals, emboldened by a resurgent opposition party, launched smear campaigns and stalled crucial legislation. But Joeking, no longer the naive outsider, had become a formidable political force. He had built a network of allies across the city, a coalition of citizens, activists, and even some reformed politicians who believed in a more transparent and equitable Lagos. He navigated the political minefield with a seasoned hand, wielding the power of public opinion and the unwavering support of his base. One of his biggest tests came in the form of a natural disaster. A devastating flood swept through the city, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Joeking, facing a crisis of unprecedented scale, rose to the occasion. He mobilized the entire city, leveraging the power of social media and community networks. Volunteers poured in from all corners of Lagos, some with shovels and sandbags, others with medical supplies and cooked meals. The city, once a fragmented collection of neighborhoods, came together as a united force. The disaster underscored the importance of Joeking's reforms. Empowered local councils, with their intimate understanding of their communities, played a pivotal role in rescue and relief efforts. Transparency in resource allocation ensured that aid reached those who needed it most. In the aftermath of the disaster, Lagos emerged stronger, more resilient. The experience solidified Joeking's position as the city's undisputed leader, a symbol of hope and unity. However, every leader, no matter how beloved, eventually faces the question of succession. Joeking, nearing the end of his second term, knew it was time to step aside. He had nurtured a new generation of leaders within his party, young men and women who embodied the principles of Lagos for change. He handpicked his successor, a brilliant young woman named Amaka, who had risen through the ranks of the community councils. Amaka embodied the spirit of the new Lagos. She had a deep understanding of the city's challenges, honed by years of working at the grassroots level. She also possessed a refreshing pragmatism, a willingness to learn from both Joeking's successes and failures. As Joeking watched Amaka deliver her inaugural address, a wave of emotions washed over him. There was a tinge of sadness at leaving the helm, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of pride. He had come a long way, from the scrappy street kid to the leader who had transformed the city. Lagos was still a work in progress, a complex metropolis with its share of problems. But it was a city on the move, a city where hope had replaced cynicism, and where the power truly resided with the people. Joeking, the Kingpin, had stepped off the throne, but his legacy, a spirit of active citizenship, a demand for transparency, and a relentless pursuit of a better future, would continue to shape the city he loved for generations to come.